IFB. So for those of you that have to do an IFB in the future, then that's something that you can kind of start talking to Jesse about, and then our contacts in Forward Health in the association are trying to work on that. So keep that in mind, and it's in Nicaragua, inside Rwanda. Is there anything else to
like kinds of things that we can do to help them from afar. Of course, it's not realistic that all of us can go down to Nicaragua, but they had they need Spanish language resources. They need, of course, fundraising help. They need help with benchmarks. They don't know what. They're just starting off, and so in order to tell funders and grantors and stuff, they need to be able to show progress. So they need assistance with what kind of benchmarks we'll do. And then they've gone out and collected, like Morgan mentioned, assessment, but then they're kind of okay, so there are actually a lot of opportunities. I was surprised, really surprised when and again they were visiting on Tuesday as well. We met with them. And so there's a number of ways to plug in. So if anyone is interested in doing something specifically with Forward Health, feel free to come talk to any of us as we'll start we just had the meeting on Tuesday, so I think we're going to put our things together about what moving forward, what are the next projects and tasks, and I think we'll reach out to people if they want to help plug into those.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of help them try and get off the ground and kind of plug in and use our public health skills and put them to work with them. And then some service updates we have, and I'm not 100% sure if this wasn't there at the service meeting, but these are things that we have. We went to the service meeting with Ellen recently, and these are kind of the things that we've taken on from Ellen that she's given us, the events coming up. And they're listed: Kevin Hart, Cinco de Mayo Health Service Day, February 27th Homeless Count, and Give Life. So those are all things that she's kind of given to us to GHSA to help recruit volunteers and to kind of take the names and put it in those things. But she's going to be, a helper, she'll be sending out things, I'm sure, and those coming up to those, asking for people to sign up. So we just wanted to give you guys a heads up to keep those back in your mind for service opportunities. And then World Health Day, we're actually pretty excited about this because Arturo is helping work on this with us, and we're taking the lead on World Health Day, which is going to be part of National Public Health Week in April. So the Monday, the first, I think that's right? The end of the week is, so the Monday of that week is World Health Day, and it ends on the Friday. So the whole week the school's going to be doing all kinds of things here. There's lots of opportunities, speakers, events, things going on. So that's what we wanted to make, since we are GHSA, World Health Day. We're going to try and pull that together. So that's something that we're doing. Arturo's working on that right now. And part of the thing was with the labs, with Dr. Novak's labs. We're working with Dr. Novak to try and see if we can bring people into his labs, and it's an awesome opportunity to be able to look at all of the stuff that they do in the labs, with mosquitoes, vector control, all of that stuff. So we're working on that. We'll have more logistics and information about that coming up. And then I actually just got this email yesterday from Jessica Grossman. She's the, she kind of runs everything in the global health department under the professors. It's basically their lifeline and keeps us all informed about everything. She has emailed us and let us know that the American Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene is taking new members, and USF has a partnership with them right now. So that if you're interested in becoming a member of this group, that they have discounted or fees, reduced fees for members, and that if you want to sign up, to email her, give her your name, email address, and phone number by next Friday, by 5 p.m., and she can help set you up with that and get you a member of the American Society of Tropical Medicine.
I'm pretty sure it's free.
Okay, it is free. Okay, yeah, it is free for us.
Confusing.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
She had contradictory emails. So
yeah, I emailed her and she sent right back cool, thanks.
Okay,
you're good. Nothing about money. So
okay, awesome. So if you're interested in that, it's a great opportunity to kind of get your foot in the door with that organization. And then socials and fundraisers. These are some more tentative ideas and plans that we have coming up soon. So let us know your input if you have any feedback. But we would like to do the ropes course at Riverfront Park. I haven't done it yet. I'm not sure if any of you guys have done it at USF Riverfront Park. I'm not sure if you guys are, some of you first years might not or be aware of it. But it's a park that USF has down by, it's essentially Legislative Park. But USF has their own area, and there's frisbee golf or disc golf, canoeing, all this cool stuff that you can do there. Pavilions, picnics, you can cook out. So we want to have kind of a day at Riverfront Park, but we want to do the ropes course. And there is a fee required, and we can look into that. And you have to do kind of a brief little training, because obviously they don't just throw you up in the course unless you go. I think it's 3 or 4 stories tall or something. But you're going to have a little community group building, kind of get to know each other better, trust building kind of event. So if anybody's interested in that.
And Kurt said that GHSA might pay for it too.
Okay.
So
that's, we can
not
keep talking about that.
Anyone. There's 3 dates. 3 options for us. The 2nd and 23rd are Sundays. If we want to do it on a Sunday, we'd have it for 6 hours. We'd have access to the high ropes, which is awesome. And then there's the 29th, which is a Saturday. So how did we want to take a poll? Or
is there any day that you guys, right off as of right now, are looking at that sound better for you guys? If you guys would prefer, or we can send out like an email and see like preference or a doodle poll or something maybe. Just the
We
preference.
could do it doodle on Facebook.
Okay, yeah, we can put it on the Facebook page on our GHSA. So if anybody's interested in that, just keep an eye out for the doodle on there, and then we'll get a group of us together, and that'll be fun. So that'll be kind of like more towards the end of the semester, kind of chill out, know each other, hang out. All we all know each other pretty well now, but little extra hanging out never hurt. And then laser tag and bowling, which we did actually in the fall, and that was actually pretty successful, and I think we had a really good time with that. We got some money out of that, so that's good for fundraising. So if anybody is interested in doing that again this semester, that's something that we can talk about and do. I know I had a blast. We dressed up for Halloween, so that's pretty fun. We can maybe do something themed again, or however we wanted to go with that. Dude, what do you say? St. Patrick's Day? Yeah. Some kind of competition or something. Maybe we can do that. Come in like the green parties. That'll be good. You will win. And then a raffle. We were thinking about maybe doing a raffle as another kind of form of fundraising, but not 100% sure what. Did we talk about what we wanted to raffle, or was it you were just throwing that out there for people had ideas?
T-shirts.
Okay, we're working on that.
You wanna step in front of the camera? I'm just joking.
Oh, sure. Yes, we also have Arturo's doing Google Hangouts for this, so this is being broadcast right now. So when Daniel comes up and talks in a second, everybody, whoever wants to be able to check it out. But, so yeah, the raffle, we keep you guys up to date on all that and all the new events coming out. So, I guess that's about all that we're going to do right now. And then, Daniel, thank you so much for coming to talk with us today. That was going to be great. Oh, yeah, do you want to? Yeah, so Anna can introduce him. She's actually seen him speak already.
Or kind of. No.
Well, sort of, but.
Ish. So this is Daniel Schadrac, and he's a student here at USF. And I think a number of you went to the genocide talk. There was a Rwandan genocide speaker. Oh, should we go in front of them? I think a number of you went to the genocide speaker that they had over at the main library. And Carl Wilkins, I think was his name. And when he was speaking and he was talking about his experience during the 1994 genocide and how he stayed, Daniel happened to pipe up and mention a question, and then that started kind of a dialogue between Carl and Daniel. And then there was just lots of Q&A in the room, and spoke very eloquently about kind of his personal experience with Rwanda. So Curtis and I went and talked to him afterwards, and he graciously agreed to, perfect timing.
Hi, yeah, great.
Graciously agreed to come speak to us and kind of share a little bit of his perspective. And it's a little bit of a different talk than we've had at other, I think, GHSA meetings where we've talked about like mosquito, like vector control or infectious disease. But again, the context, I think, and the historical context around a lot of the health issues that we'll be working with. I think it's interesting to hear the human side of some of those issues. So you'll take it away, Daniel. Thank you.
First, before I say hello, I was wondering if I could move the camera over there, because I don't want to. I want to not have a barrier between us as we speak.
Hello, Elizabeth. Are you on? She's watching Google Hangout right now. Here, maybe we'll do it this way.
She seriously.
I think that works.
Is that good?
Yeah, I think that
Also,
works.
well, I want to say hello again. I just want to say thank you to Anna and Curtis, because this is, as she said, this isn't for me to give a scholarly, I guess, conversation to you all. I wanted to be able to give a story, because sometimes when we hear about atrocities or we hear stories about places that are distant from us, we get caught up with just seeing numbers, and we lose the face, the tears, the joy, the laughter. So I wanted to be able to give everyone just the story of not just me, because I was born in 1995, but the story that happened before me and how it affected me and where we are all today. So who am I? I'm Daniel Schadrac once again. Hello. I'm a first year at USF. My major is Africana Studies, and I'm on the pre-med track towards going to be an osteopathic doctor. And as I said, the reason I'm here today, this is actually honestly the first time that I've given this story to people that are specifically listening to me to hear my family's story. And so I think that this will be a very great thing for me to be able to grow and learn and really open this part up about my life to people who are willing to hear and have questions. So I first wanted to be able to give a little background of what Rwanda is, since we hear it and we've maybe seen a movie that Hollywood made called Hotel Rwanda. And I just want to be able to give a bigger perspective of what it is. So I just want to play 4 minutes of this. It's a little advertisement that they use, but this is the unedited version that they
I slept in hills of wheat and mine. Too many years I passed me by. I go down from the mountain. I go down from the mountain. I come down from the mountain. I come down from the mountain. We danced and drank to pass the time. I come down from the mountain. 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 Memories of times been away, vanished into the sun. You found living in the water, living in the water, living in the water. You found living in the water.
it's funny when you see these parts right here, when you see the children all coming up when the helicopter comes down, or when you see them running after the van. It's kind of it's funny because what you see here is people who are excited. But one of the reasons they're excited is, usually it's pretty calm in countries like this, and so when they would see white people, they would sometimes one of the things they would think when they saw that was either like the white people automatically have rich and have money and they have the opportunity to get scholarships and stuff like that, or it's just very curious to see that. And the word that in Africa, like more in the eastern area, that they have for white people is Mzungu. So sometimes I'll be running after the car and be like, Mzungu, Mzungu, and it's something very special. It's not like something you see of hostility or like fear. It's more like awe. That's why they saw the helicopter and everybody's putting their hands up, peace sign and everything like that. Before I start with the story, I just want to emphasize that the story that I want to tell is not of sadness and pain, but truly of victory and of healing. Obviously, it starts pretty dark, but through the years and through time, and both in me, my family, and the country of Rwanda, there's been healing, and from it, victory. Truly, if we had quit and let that be the trademark of Rwanda, of bloodshed and of a stain, and quit, that would have been when the true lack of success and failure would have been. So as I tell the story, I'm going to pull up this one picture of Central Africa so that when I'm saying some of these countries, they'll be able to see. So you see that small little thing right here, that's Rwanda. And on the south is Burundi. And then Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya. This is where the story will take place. So in 1994, as we all know about the genocide that we may have seen or have heard, that's usually the thing that if you hear Rwanda, you might hear that. But it started much further back than that. The thing curious about Rwanda is that it's very mountainous, as we saw in the video, and usually Africa is very plains or jungle or plateaus, but it's quite the opposite in Rwanda. And another thing is that usually in many of these places, like you see the Democratic Republic of Congo and other places, there's many different tribes and like ethnic cultures in here. But in Rwanda, there's only one, and it's called the Banyarwanda. And that's when we hear about Tutsi, Hutu, and Twa. Now, I even myself had it confused that these Tutsi, Hutu, and Twa were different ethnicity or ethnic groups. Truly, what you could best describe it as is a caste system. How the Tutsi were, you could say, at the top, then it was Hutu, and Twa was kind of down there. And the main thing that would dictate wealth and prestige was cows. As you saw those bulls with the long horns, Tutsi were known to be the cow herders and the ones that took care of them, had the land and the grazing, and the Hutu were the farmers, and they were the ones that would be able to like loan the cows or take care of them. That was about it. So the Tutsi were the minority and still are, about 14%, while Hutu are over 80%. And what they have for the characteristics, they're just more like stereotypes. Was like Hutu were like the short, darker skinned, kind of stocky, whereas Tutsi were tall skinned, slender people. And as you can see with me, my father was Tutsi, but yet I am pretty dark myself, and I'm not tall and, well, I'm kind of tall and skinny as that is. So that's how the demographics of it look. Now, with the tension that had been growing, it truly began. And another thing that's very curious about Rwanda is that it was very isolated. They didn't really let a lot of foreigners in back then. That's why, Rwanda wasn't really a place that was affected by slave trade, because they didn't let foreigners that would be coming during the colonization period into it. But during the Berlin Conference, when Africa was split up by the Europeans to say, you guys could have this, this, and that, Germany was the ones that had the domain over Rwanda area. But it was kind of like a boring area. There wasn't really resources or minerals that they could, siphon out of there. So they kind of just let it be. It's very small, as you see, yet there's over 5 million people in that one small area. And you can put, as Carl Wilkins was saying, you can put several, 100 Rwandas in Florida. And just think, over 5 million people in such a small place. that was where kind of some of the tension began, was the need for land, especially for being able to graze your cows and take care of farmland. So the frustration began in that area. So Germany, after World War I, they lost the conquest of Rwanda, and Belgium was the place that took Rwanda. Again, they didn't really pay too much attention to it until really near the decolonization period of Africa, so around 1959 to the 60s was really when it started. The tension really began to grow, and some of the colonization tactics were called divide and conquer. So Belgium would go in, see what separated the people, make sure that they had them kill each other, and then come in to get the spoils. So as land was becoming a large tension, there was something that they called the social revolution, or as also known as the wind of destruction, was another name for it. And what happened in this time was actually where Hutu people who had been empowered, I guess you could say, and encouraged by the Belgians to kill Tutsi people. And this is something that wasn't necessarily recorded and really known well, but over 50,000 people were killed, Tutsi people, and many more fled into Congo area or into Burundi. And so that was when the Hutu dominance really began in Rwanda. Now they were the people in power. So after this time, after that, it had been stopped, but the tension and the hatred grew. And really the only thing that you could see if someone was Hutu or Tutsi was on their identification ID, which had been administered by the Belgians around the 50s. So I would not be able to know if you were, unless I had a stereotype, unless I saw your ID, just kind of like what they did with the Jews, and be able to see your identification. So that was really how the tension began to grow. It continued to grow. It continued to grow, and my father was actually, he had been affected by this wind of destruction, this social revolution in the 50s, because he was around, in the late 50s, early 60s, he was around 6, 7 years old, and he actually remembers people coming up to his home, which was he lived in a western Rwanda area, in a small province, and the area was called Kibuye, and they went to his parents' household, burned down the house, and they had to hide for a while. And he was about 6 or 7 years old. So he grew up with the tension growing. So Belgium's gone. The majority of the European colonization's over. 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s come, and that's when finally we hear about this genocide that happens in '94. So that's really when my family's story begins. So my father was working, I guess you could say, in the U.S. Embassy, and he was going to school as well. And at this time, he was already married and had 3 children. Those were my older sisters. I'm the youngest. And he could see, because he was part of the people, as Carl Wilkins said, he was somewhat oblivious to what was going on, because this was really kind of like, how you have family matters and you don't really tell outside people, what's going on in the family, you put on a smile. So these were really in-house tension. And he could see that it was coming to a point. In 1994, during February, March, you would hear about scattered things of people being killed here, or a grenade being thrown in this area, some people being killed or bludgeoned to death. So he knew that something was going to happen. So what he did in March 1994 is that he took my mother and my sisters to Tanzania. So he drove them over to the border, and he had them to go and basically live and hide for the time. And the area that they went to was a small little sign that says Mwanza. And so they were there in Tanzania. And he came back to Rwanda just to go back to work. So he knew in his heart, if anything would happen, my family's safe, and it would be much easier for one person to flee than for the whole family to flee. So he comes back April 1st. And then the genocide begins in April 6th. And when this happened, you couldn't just be unaffected by this, because this was something that wasn't just the military that came out and just had a coup and was just shooting people with guns. This was the whole society. One of the things they fed off of during the genocide was that You know, in Rwanda, people are very social and very close, and you have family. And so what they fed off of that is that you had this entire group of people. In English, they called it, like this actual coalition, they called it, you know, We Strike Together. That was the name of it. And they would use the villagers, children, school children, and one of the main things that would help them be fed off of the rage was a radio broadcast that would go on day after day. If you've seen Hotel Rwanda, you might have, you know, seen the little part where you would hear this guy talking, and they would call the Tutsi cockroaches and try to dehumanize them, make them something separate. And the thing that made the breaking point on April 6th was the assassination of the president. So his plane was rocketed and shot down, and it was blamed on the Tutsi people and of the RPF, which was the Rwandan Patriotic Front that was trying to, which had been Tutsi that had fled previously after the social revolution and had came back, you know, the next generation wanting to take back Rwanda. And so they blamed it on them, and they said, anybody that's Tutsi, if it's your neighbor, if it's someone you know, they're an enemy now. You need to be together because they're trying to kill you. So it was a separation of us versus them. You know, you don't know what they're doing, so you might as well be prepared now. And so they had the Hutu, that was you, Tutsi, that was them, and the Twa were even affected. Even though it's a 1%, they were still affected, and, you know, sometimes they would be killed. So you would have neighbor against neighbor. Just imagine that you in your neighborhood, and the next morning you see 3 households going over to another household, burning it down, and you've had cookouts together. You know each other, you know each other's children, each other's family. And in doing this, because you have this concept of they're the enemy. And another thing was, if we get rid of them, we will be rewarded and we will get land. And so these were some of the feeding to this hatred that had been going for so long. So my father, April 6th, when it began, he had begun to live with a family since, you know, his family was gone in Tanzania. And he was hiding in this household until April 8th, you know, locked in, you know, would not be able to go out to the store and get some food or anything like that. They were here, and he could hear the gunshots coming closer and closer. And so he was like, you know, I have to go. He left the family April 8th in the black of night, and he thought to himself, if I could get to this high school that was kind of ran by the Belgian priests and so on and so forth, if I could get to this school, then I'll be good. I'll be safe. So he fled, and, you know, for a story that's his own, you know, I won't try to go too detailed into his story, but, you know, things like such as when he was fleeing, that period of him going from that house to the high school, which was a very long distance, he had actually been caught and surrounded by a gang of Hutus that were actually out there finding people and killing people. And they saw his identification, and what he did, he got on his knees and he prayed to the Lord, and he said, if you will protect me from this, and you keep me alive, then I will always tell this testimony wherever I go. And the ringleader of them was just like, just give us your money, let the idiot go, he's going to be killed by somebody else. And as they were fighting over the currency that he gave him, about, you know, 3,000 francs, which is maybe equivalent to $5-6 USD, you know, he begins to flee, and he finally makes it to the high school. And he thought he was going to be by himself when he got there. Like, you know, he was going to be solo. But there was over 3,000 people already there from the neighboring villages that had the same idea, that if we were able to get to the Europeans or find the Americans, we would be safe. And during this whole period of time, what had happened, as soon as this atrocity began, they were making sure that they were taking the expatriates out of from Europe, from America, so on and so forth. Because, you know, if you have these internationals to be killed, they didn't want that on their records. So Europe was trying to bring them out, evacuate them, and if people were begging to go, they'd be like, you know, you cannot, this is just for the expatriates, it's time for us to go. Yet my father still had the audacity to go up to the man and ask him, you know, my family's in Tanzania, you know, I was part of the U.S. Embassy, you know, I was helping, so on and so forth, and he was saying, no, you can't. And he asked him for like the whole day, until finally he just put him on the list, and he was like, okay, just get on and go. And so he drove with them from the embassy to Kigali, to the Kigali airport. And, you know, it was so amazing that, to the fact that as they're driving to Kigali, they see people on the street just being killed, just right in front of their face. And the thing about the UN is that there's a quote that this man said that, like, we didn't have enough ammo to have a 7-minute gunfight. You know, but still, the biggest thing for them to be there was their presence. To be able to have this international presence in Rwanda would have been able to stop a lot. And we don't know to this day what would have happened if they had stayed. But when they fled, legitimately, as soon as like this high school, the expatriates left, a couple of days later, the Hutu people that were killing and murdering would come into this and just wipe out everybody that was there. And this was something that systematically would happen. And we have to have the understanding that this wasn't just some random anarchy, people just going crazy and getting bludgeons. This had been something they had been planning for years. And as soon as that rocket was shot and killed the president, they began the operation. Because they knew that that nobody would care. As in, internationally, no one would have an outcry and say, we need to come in and stop this. Because even previously, before, they had tests, but they had 100,000, they would have thousands of Tutsis, kill them, and wait, and see if anything would happen with the news. Nothing would happen. They would know that they were able to do this. So my father, April 11th, was able to flee from Kigali to Kenya. And from there, he was able to call my mother and tell her that he was safe. And from there, they were able to go from Africa in a further story to come to a small place called Winter Haven, Florida. And that's where I was born in 1995 in the Winter Haven Hospital in Polk County in Central Florida. And so from there is really when my story begins. When I grew up, I can say I was very ignorant of the fact of where I came from. I knew that there was some kind of difference between me because when I come home, my parents are speaking a different language that's not English. I didn't really ask too much into it. I remember when I was young one time, I was asking my mom, I don't know why, but I think I was like, oh, we're from Africa? And I'm like, Mom, are we like from a tribe or something? She was like, we're cooking, and she's like, yes. I'm like, what's the name? And she's like, yeah, Tutsi. And I'm like, oh, cool, I'm Tutsi. And she was like, be quiet, like, you know, don't really like say that, like running around, because, you know, it wasn't really something that, yes, it was talked about, but it wasn't something like, it would bring up past her. You know, I'm 2-3 years old. I was born a year after it, so it's like 5 years of not just, you know, surviving this, but, you know, your whole family being killed. You know, just having them like scattered on. Sometimes you don't even know who's alive because they would run and flee. You know, the statistics say that maybe 20,000 people were killed. It's so off because you can't record the people that were thrown into mires, into ravines, the people that were killed in mountains. You know, the number that, you know, my father says, and that I agree with, is that 1 million people in 100 days. 1 million people killed in only 100 days. And this wasn't with rockets and helicopters. This was with machetes, bludgeons, you know, maybe a couple handguns. This was the people systematically going out and doing this thing. And growing up, as I said, so my father would have times to sit us down and like show us a video or a movie. But I didn't understand, so I'd just be scared in my bed and be like, oh, some like Hutu person's gonna jump into the window and come and kill me, because I had no understanding of what was going on. And also, you know, because my parents had French degrees, because the university that was there would be a French one. So you'd speak the language spoken in Rwanda is called Kinyarwanda. So you'd speak that, but if you were going to be educated, you'd have to have a general language that was accepted, and that was French at the time. Now it's kind of changing over to English. So because of their French degrees, when they came here to America, those degrees were equivalent of 2 degrees lower. So my dad had to go back to school, and my mother did as well. And my mother just continued to do more nursing. And my father, because he has 3 children and a wife that he has to maintain and take care of, went to school quickly for a mental health counselor. That's what he is to this day. So I didn't really have that kind of, I wouldn't say I didn't have time with them, because I had several time with them, but what they wanted us to be able to do is go to school, be educated, and be able to, you know, grow up. So Kinyarwanda I understand to an extent, but I don't speak. Like I say, I speak English, and the language that I'm growing to learn is French, so I can be able to go back to Africa and not just in Rwanda, but be around in the area, be able to communicate and have that barrier broken off. But the first time I went back to Africa was when I was 12. And that the reason of our return was because my grandparents, which are my father's parents, their bones had been finally found. And so one of the missions that we were going to do when we went was to bury their bones. And so this is 13 years after the genocide. And I mean, I can't even imagine that, to be able to not even know, just have this glimmer of thinking that my parents were killed, but not even know where their bodies were. And then 13 years later, as you're trying to heal from this process, to hear that their bones have been found. And around about this time, my father had made a nonprofit organization called the Good Shepherd Foundation, in which he was helping widows and orphans of the genocide to be able to start life again, be able to have a home and be able to have a community together, be able to call each other mother and sister, and be able to buy some goats for them to be able to make some money and be able to sustain each other. So we went there and we painted a house and so on and so forth, saw some of the graves and things. And finally we went to Kibuye and went up to the mountain wearing purple scarves, because that was a symbol of, I guess you could say, a funeral trek. And as we're going, as I said, it's a very social country. Like, if you have a wedding, you might invite people, but everybody from the village is going to show up, just come straight from out of nowhere. Like, if something's happening, everyone's going to be there. So as we're walking on this trek, people are just kind of gathering with us and going up to the mountain, finally until we have this, large group of people. And, we didn't even have, like, all of the bones. It was just as much as we could find. And it was not just my grandfather and grandmother, but also a cousin whom I will not know. And we were able to get the bones. Basically, we had just one coffin and rolled them up and buried them. And during this ceremony, one of the biggest things that happened that I won't forget was a man who had still been living on this mountain. He was drunk when he was there, came to the funeral. This man professed that he had killed one of my father's cousins, and in front of everyone, just like lamenting and repenting of this fact. And my father embraced the man and he forgave him. And that's really the thing that I really want to emphasize and leave with, that this kind of hurt you can't just outgrow. You have to really learn to forgive, because even the people, the Hutus who had done this, after the fact, they had blood on their hands, and many fled. They went to these camps outside, and just refugee camps, and they just fled because they were so ashamed of what they had done for land or for any other thing that had been driving them. And they needed that forgiveness as much as my father did, and as much as I did to forgive other people who later in my life I realized I had to forgive Europe, like all of Europe. I didn't know that I had this against them, but I truly had to put in my heart that I forgave them, and of Belgium for the things that I had, blamed them for doing. So that was me, 12 years old, going to this event, and that was one of the things that I was left with. And also, another thing that really impacted me when I went that first time was just the life of the country of Africa. This was just a video, and I'm just, just smiling again, because the country's alive. If you ever have a time to go travel, wherever it may be, truly have your eyes open and your ears willing to listen, and just not just to the people, but to the land. Because no matter how many times you may try to abuse or rape or kill the land, it will still hum. And I could feel that, and I could see it in the people, and I could see it in the culture. How they held themselves after all these years of something that so significant had happened to them and their land and their people, and they were still able to sing and to dance and to have family and to have culture. So growing up as a second generation genocide survivor, you hear a lot of the stories of the people who've been directly affected, but you never really hear about their children and what happened next. So me being born, my father and my parents, they had and lost, family members. I grew up without. I was born with the fact that they had been, taken from me, if I could say. A culture that had been kind of stolen from me, that I had never an option to really, tap into until I was older and made the decision to. And the way that it affected me was in a different sense of really feeling at times, sometimes I would feel alone, growing up, seeing, these huge families in America, and I'm just like, where are my cousins and my uncles and aunts, and, some of them actually live in Birmingham, in Europe, and it's like so spread out. And that's kind of why I asked that question during the event. Like, he said that sometimes he would have like people from Rwanda that would stand up and say something. I'm like, where is this concentration of people that you see? Because the only two families we've seen are in Tennessee and Georgia. That was about the only ones. And he said that a lot of them are in the West, like Salt Lake City area. And I was like, Salt Lake City area, like, why are they there? But, that was something that we talked about. It kind of made sense, because when one would get there, more would start to get there. Again, it was a place of the culture never leaves, of being together and growing together. And so when some would be there, that's when the community would grow over there, which is very surprising in that matter of fact. So I've been back one more time, and that was during a wedding of a family member of mine, and that wedding was so long. It was so amazing how long it was. Like, my cousin who grew up in Rwanda, he's like, man, I'm going to get married in America. So it legitimately started at 8 a.m. and was not done until 2 a.m. of the next day. And in between that whole time, there was no food. They gave us some Fantas, because they have the old-fashioned cans. They gave us some Fantas. It was a lot of traditional. My father was so proud. He was like, you guys are gonna love this. This is a Rwandan marriage. This is how it happens. And he was like, this is not how I was married. What happened? Why is there no food, and so on and so forth? Because some of the things that you would do in the past was you would go to the bride's house and you would give the cows to the family, or whatever gift it may be. And it would be kind of I wouldn't say a trading, but it would be like a pact being sealed between the fathers. And this marriage is not just some kind of contract. It's an alliance. Your families are coming together, and so it's like one family accepting another family. So they're having all these traditional things. You saw the men that were dancing. They had some kind of mock. They call it singing the cows home. So they have this professional guy that sings cows home, and there's no cows, there's just him on a mic singing the traditional song because every farmer would have his own song for his own cows. So when he sang this song, the cows would legitimately come home. And so he's doing this thing he professionally does for every marriage, and they had other professional things that happened. And it was just so long. I was like, oh my gosh! We went to 4 different scenes, that one, then a church where they had a sermon, and then the giving of the ring, and then another scene. And so my family was like, we got to go get some food. At 11 p.m. we were like, we have to go. But that was the second time I went, and that was when I was older. I think about 2 to 3 years ago. And again, the country is alive. And one of the things that, for me, like I said, as a second-generation genocide survivor, one of the things that really kind of put a line sometimes between me and fully immersing myself in the Rwandan culture is the language that I was not able to fully learn. So, somebody would come up to me and be like, I'm a fool, and the response is Nimeza, but, I'd just be like, and, saying, praise God, whenever you see each other, you're praise God, you're like, Yesu Shimei, you say Yesu Shimei Chana, and I'd just be like, Yesu Shimei. Give a hug, and they'd be confused, this person's African, why isn't he speaking? And then my parents would be like, oh, he's American. Oh, I'm sorry. Some kind of ailment happened to me, as if I'm broken, I'm mute. So it's interesting, because I grew up in America with the Black American community. I watched from the outside looking in. And as well with the Rwandan community, it was kind of I was looking from the outside looking in. So I have these 2 worlds that I'm not fully immersed in. and I couldn't, even if I wanted to. But it's been a growing experience for me, really finding my own personal identity, to be able to, when I grew up, going to this Rwandan house, and then going to another world when I went to school, and then coming back to this Rwandan house. And so I've really been able to pull from both sides, but never really fully being in it, just, you know, of it. And it's a very curious thing. I think that's one thing, if anybody's been a child of, you know, immigration, you know, that's something that you could say that you might have been affected by as well. You know, if you were lucky to be able to retain the language, that would have been a very good blessing. But if not, to feel the plight of like, I want to communicate with like my people, but I can't. So in a confusing, you know, dialogue that would come between me, like, you know, so then what am I, you know, so on and so forth. And it's really produced someone that, in me, I want to help both communities, because I see, you know, blessings and hurts in both communities, you know, in the medical, in the social, you know, in the spiritual, in the mental. You know, there are many things that are very great in both, and that are still hurting and lacking in many too. So that's kind of the story in a very vague and loaded area, so that we can have a very open discussion to ask whatever you may about the leaving, me living, so on and so forth. And I guess the last thing I would like to leave as a takeaway is that, you know, as Anna has been telling me about this, you know, the Global Health Student Association, we all want to go out to help, you know, even if it's here in America, go out to these other countries, you know, may they be poverty-stricken or not, and be able to help in the places of medicinal purposes that people are hurting in. And I really wanted to emphasize and not to say this in a finger-pointing way, but as an open, because it can happen, to not feel, to not have this savior complex of, I'm going to help you, you're going to receive from me, and then I will leave. And to be able to have this notch on my belt that, you know, I went to India and it was, you know, great, like, you know, people were really cool. You know, I was able to do this, you know, really come receiving as well, because they have much to teach you, and you have much to teach them as well. And if you really come in and see that it's in the community, see, really the true healing comes whenever you're able to open your heart, not just see a set of organs or a person that's sick, but see a person that has a family and has a story. And really see that, you know, if I can teach them X, Y, and Z, you know, maybe they can, you know, teach their cousin and teach that child, and maybe this person who has a strength of leadership, because you've seen that in them. You know, I could mentor this one, and he could begin to be a good leader, maybe a school teacher, and start a school here, and be able to teach on the medical purposes and the practicalities of this. And they'll be able to teach you things as well, such as, you know, the word Mzungu, or other small practical things that are very interesting, and you will not forget. So thank you, and that's my little story. And if anybody has any questions, I'm open for a dialogue. I wanted to get all of that out so there could be so a conversation could begin. So if you have questions, we could talk back and forth. Okay.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say something. I think the word Zoom started from Kenya.
Yeah.
So yeah. You guys go to Africa, East Africa, you call him Zoom. Don't feel offended. It's the same thing. I still can know, but people know what to offend. They'll check with that. Hey, Zoom, children start following me.
Yes. I'll start running after.
So in '94, I remember that time. I was playing soccer. I was in a soccer field with my friends, and I was 9 years old. So, and I remember this. Somebody brought a newspaper, and there were cartoons written on the newspaper on the president for Rwanda.
Yes.
It was this rocket.
Yeah.
Hit the plane and went down. Yeah. So that is actually when everybody in the conversation started, like we were starting the radios and everything.
Yes.
And I will never forget that time. It's just like that 9/11 that happened in the US. I was in high school and I remember seeing the newspaper. Those pictures are really, really important.
Yes.
But can I say? I mean, I have some friends in the U.S. and they're always interested in what happened to them in Rwanda. So they flew to Kenya and then they came back to the U.S.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but, yeah, I'm glad also that you started from the Congo and divide thing, but Europeans, same thing happened everywhere in Kenya. You see what happened in South Africa, see what happened in Zimbabwe, in Kenya with the Mamau, and what happened in Rwanda. So that thing is really good. So the divide and conquer, I think that is a big part.
Yes. Yes. And even to this day, you can see the effect of a vacuum of the ones that were there and the vacuum that happened in the fight for power for them. Like you see in the northeast near like Nigeria area and further over into Ghana area, they're still fighting and it's warlord versus warlord, and it's the same people, but because there was power and it's gone, there's an opportunity. And so this opportunity, you have to kill others. And the sad thing is, even if you become the ruler, there will be others that will wait for you and assassinate you and become the ruler, so on. And we see in Sudan it was on fire. You know, it still is, even though they've divided it. And these things are still happening. If you go, did you know that like right now in Ethiopia right now, there's a genocide of albino people right now, in which they are killing these children, young and old, just the fact that they're albino, not because of racism, but for good luck charms. They're killing them and taking off parts of their body to either give to shamans to have for potions or so on and so forth, or just simply a good luck charm. And that's something that you can only see if you look up, or maybe if BBC says something about it. But it's really something that the fight goes on, and it was ignited, and it just needed to be ignited because there was all these tribes before, and then you put a line in between it. So these three could be enemies, but we just put a border around them. Now they're stuck together. And then you have colonization, like he said, divide and conquer. So I see your difference. It's kind of like someone who's like an instigator. It's like, oh, I heard she said that about you. And then I leave. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I know that you said that how it was divided was like kind of like a caste system. So do you guys go by like your fathers?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not like people more like if your father is or your mother, you know that you take your father's.
Yes. What would happen is if your father's Tutsi, then the wife, if she was Hutu, kind of gets wiped from her system, and she would be Tutsi, and so would the children. Vice versa, if a Hutu married a Tutsi and he was a male, the children would become Hutu, and it would kind of be wiped from her. So if you're the male is Tutsi, then the family would be killed. And it's a very curious thing that, some believe, and it was one of the excuses that they said to bring the divide of how, as, they were, the Tutsi, were the cow herders, that they were the Nilotic people that came from the north, like from Egypt area, and came down with these cows, and had these herders, and that's what was the divide, and that's it. But intermarrying happened so much that the difference was so minimal that it was a difference that the only difference they could find. So it was really of not even of color or of, even though, like I said, the stereotypes of like Hutu had like bigger lips and like a fatter nose and darker, but really it was if you are in the system of owning, and taking care of cows, which was the very past, because then nowadays, you could be a peasant and have at least one cow. You were Tutsi, and the Hutu were the farmers. My father's parents were peasants, yet they were Tutsi. So that shows that this classification was, it was broken to begin with. But it was a way. It was a way for them to bring a wedge in between. So yeah.
I'm originally from Ethiopia, and that's kind of what happened. Like if you're half Ethiopian, half Eritrean, because there's a war going on going on for like more than 10 years.
Yeah.
But they didn't know what to do with the people that were half Ethiopian and half Eritrean, so they kind of started going with the fathers.
Now that you're getting older and you started studying the USF and you're studying like some of these political issues in history around Africa, has that opened up more dialogue between like you and your parents? And like, for example, has your father started talking with you specifically more about maybe what happened during the genocide or lessons learned, things like that?
Yes, the conversation about the genocide had been going on with me and my family and like my sisters and so on since I had been growing up. This is my first year here in USF, and so this is semester 2. So I've begun in Africana Studies, as she was stating. So I'm in like a 1,000 class that's like it's called Introduction to the Black Experience. It's kind of like the history of Black people since beginning to now, of like from everything, you know, from Caribbeans to Haiti to America. So I can say from what I've read though, you know, it's very interesting to get from the beginning, like to see how many people took over Egypt is just amazing. To see the fact that like the Greek and then you know the Persians and like it's been all kinds of people have been taking over that place, and you know the effect of the slave trade and how it's siphoned from the people. I haven't been able to like immerse myself deeply yet into Africana Studies, but I'm glad you brought up that point, because one of the reasons I picked that, you know, I was just going to do some biomed and have a safe major to go to medical school. But once I found my end goal, which was osteopathy, I was able to pick how I wanted to get there. And I chose Africana Studies because it truly, you know, pulled at my heart to be able to understand what does it mean to be Black in Africa? What does it mean to be Black in America, in Europe, in South America, and grow to understand these cultures. And as I had been saying, you know, the victories and the hurts of both of them, and be able to come out, you know, a fuller person in my perspective. So I am quite confident that it will grow a dialogue of other things. Actually, I found out after the event with Carl Wilkins that my father has been interviewed by USF like in 1999. So I was like kind of looking at some of the clips. You know, he had hair, and a full beard and everything. And yeah, but it is very interesting to be able to get the full story, and you know, month after month, just specific questions about things like, you know, what is my family genealogy? And he'll you know tell me up to like 7 generations, and then I'll try to remember them. You know, and just bringing the understanding of like, where are my roots? Like where is my history? You know, because that's my foundation. That's where I came from, and to be able to grow from that and understand that, and not that it defines me, but it is a characteristic and a factor of me that I have to always put into understanding perspective. Anybody else?
Does your father's organization still do anything, the Good Shepherd?
Oh, the Good Shepherd Foundation, yeah. After a couple of years, you know, I think around 2008 when I started, after Florida and the whole like craziness that happened with the housing market and such, we had to, with the organization standard, have to step back from that. But still, he still funds, you know, specific people that he knows, like orphans and widows that basically they call him, you know, Papa whenever they call on the phone, and these mothers. So yeah, they still do that. We had like a little pig farm previously that we were just like these really huge pigs, just like taking care of them and using it to be able to. The hope of it was to be able to help them learn to help themselves, because it was like they lost so much. And one of the things that was lacking was like the help for the widows and orphans, because a lot of the men just were killed. You know, they just wouldn't come home that day, and really help them do that. So you know, there are some stories like the woman that I said who had been married was one of the people that my father had helped. My cousin Emmanuel is now, I think he's in 2nd year of residency in medical school. He's been first of his class since like forever, and like it's like number 1 and number 2 is like somewhere over here. So he's just like just blasting it, and it's, you know, just giving them something because they have a fire, and they're just channeling it, giving them hope again. And that's one of the things that, you know, we all need is a reason to fight and to have that hope, even when it's taken from them. We need someone to be able to help put that back in us again. So yeah. Anybody else?
Well, that was great.
Yes, thank you.
We have some snacks up here. If anybody's interested, help yourself. Lots of great biscuits. Also, I guess I kind of